This is the Dollemore Daily.
Hi, I'm Mike Greiner from the Democratic Activist Channel, sitting in for Jesse while he's moving from California to Washington. Don't worry, he should be back in a few days, but in the meantime, let's talk about one news item that you couldn't ignore, and it's our good buddy, Senator Ted Cruz from Texas, saying that if Republicans take back the House in 2022, they'll move forward and impeach Joe Biden. And my response to that was, well, of course they will. Cruz claims that the reason that the Republicans will do this is that turnabout is fair play. After all, the Democrats simply impeached Donald Trump because they disagreed with him, according to Cruz. He ignores the fact that Donald Trump had actually engaged in essentially soliciting a bribe from a foreign official, that being the president of Ukraine, and that there were multiple witnesses to this behavior, and that the second impeachment, which was actually supported by a number of Republicans as well as Democrats, was over the January 6th insurrection, which Donald Trump, of course, supported and has continued to support, and his refusal to essentially engage in the peaceful transfer of power between his administration and the Biden administration, which has happened every single time in the United States since the Civil War. Now, my sense is actually that Democrats, generally speaking, would much rather have not been involved in the impeachment business. I mean, the truth of the matter is there were plenty of issues that they could argue with Donald Trump about. I mean, there's the widespread unlawful behavior of the Trump administration, his self-dealing, his conflicts of interest. There were the millions of dollars he spent on his trips to his golf courses, his weaponizing the post office prior to the election, his failure to pass any kind of infrastructure legislation despite repeated promises that he would, and his incredibly unpopular multi-trillion-dollar tax giveaway to the rich, which drove our national debt into the stratosphere and will continue to do so for the next several decades. And of course, who could forget his mismanagement of the whole coronavirus situation? Now, when Ted Cruz was asked about what would be the basis for some type of impeachment against Biden, he had to kind of think about it for a little bit and finally came up with the idea of the utter lawlessness of his refusal to enforce the border. Now, that once again is an example of the Republicans' lies and their ability to turn truth into fiction. Just as George Orwell described in his classic book 1984, when Big Brother asked what 2 + 2 is, the answer is 5. Why? Not because it's true, but because Big Brother said it was. Well, in America now, in the Republican Party, Big Brother is Donald Trump. And Donald Trump says that the border is in chaos. Now, truth be told, much to my consternation, by the way, because I happen to be quite progressive on this issue, Biden has actually been much more aggressive in enforcing border policies than I would have liked, frankly. I mean, there's the case that I complained about in another video on my own channel about DHS officials rounding up Haitian immigrants in Texas and sending them back to Haiti, even though most of them had never been there. His examples of continuing the Trump policies of requiring potential immigrants to stay in Mexico or other nations in Central America before they try to proceed into the United States. And his decision not to go forward with some type of settlement that would resolve the issues between the families that had been separated by the Trump administration and the United States. So I don't exactly see this claim where Biden is not enforcing the border. There's really no factual basis for this, except for the fact, of course, that Donald Trump and his lackey said so. But in some respects, Ted's move really echoes what we see in the MAGA movement overall. I mean, the irony is, with Ted Cruz, is that, remember, he was the guy who ran against Donald Trump in the primaries. He called January 6th a violent terrorist attack, and during the primaries, he called Trump a pathological liar and a coward and refused to support him during the general election campaign. So what happened to Ted Cruz? Well, like the rest of these MAGA politicians, they decided that, hey, they wanted to go along to get along. It just really emphasizes how people like Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, who, much as I disagree with almost everything they stand for, at least have the integrity to stand up for truth and American democracy. Cruz, on the other hand, is willing to sell his soul to a man who once insulted his wife simply because he wants to get along with the MAGA crowd and doesn't want to piss them off. I guess we shouldn't be surprised because of Ted Cruz has been repeatedly called the most hated man in the Senate, a distinction which he's earned, both among Republicans and Democrats, from what I understand. But again, it just speaks to the way that this entire group of people have essentially sold their souls out to become part of this cult that follows Donald Trump. And the basis for this cult is what's called motivated reasoning, where basically you start with the conclusion that you're trying to support and then find facts to support it. So as I mentioned in another video that I'll link to up here, MAGA supporters want to say, hey, the coronavirus is never a big problem. And then they look for facts to support that, even though those facts, when put together, don't support their narrative. We see the same thing with the big lie about Donald Trump having won the election, about there being wholesale election fraud. Well, the truth of the matter is that election fraud, once this has been analyzed by any number of groups, whether they be courts, whether they be Republicans, whether they be bipartisan groups, they've all agreed that election fraud is non-existent, that Joe Biden won the election by a huge margin, and to the extent that there is any election fraud, frequently it's done by Republicans. Well, similar to those examples, we have Ted Cruz and Republicans starting from the conclusion that Joe Biden should be impeached simply because they were mad that Donald Trump was impeached, and then looking back to try to find facts to support that. Much as I have my disagreements with Democrats all the time, at a minimum, they waited until the facts led them to impeachment, where there was no way they could not impeach Donald Trump for high crimes and misdemeanors against the United States. What Ted Cruz is describing instead is a process whereby they're going to say, hey, we don't like Joe Biden, we're going to impeach him, and now we need to find a legal basis to do that. Well, Ted Cruz himself said that that's not the way impeachment is supposed to work, and about that is one thing that he is right. Well, if you agree with me or disagree with me, I'd love to see your comments down below. And if you could check out my channel, Democratic Activist, that'd be a huge help. I'll link to that down below as well. I'll see you in the next video. In the meantime, let's hope for continued progress. Thank you.